lot of tailings along the floodplain, and in 1908 we had the largest flood in the state of Montana, and particularly on the Clark Fork system. This is Milltown Dam overflowing, and the powerhouse. The dam had not quite been completed, but it did hold. So the reservoir behind it lost about 70% of its capacity, filled up with tailings and natural sediments. So you can imagine how much sediment is still being carried by that water. I suppose it's somewhere in Lake Pend Oreille. So what do you do to fix these tailings that are all along the stream from Butte all the way to Missoula? Well, we're going to start with a little piece. It was the first piece of Silverbow Creek that was rebuilt. It was rebuilt by AERO. So here was the Colorado tailings. Here was the smelter itself. So they slurry their tailings down here. And this is Silverbow Creek running right around the Colorado tailings. That's Montana Street running right there. So this is what it looks like at eye level. You can imagine this is a tailing surface. Too much acid, too much metals, nothing grows. So you can imagine what happens when it rains on that surface. The other problem with what was going on there is there was a lot of groundwater, contaminated groundwater input into the creek. So first of all, you dig up all the tailings and get them out of there. So this is kind of how thick the tailings were. I don't know, it's probably 6 feet. You can see the old buried soil horizon. What looks like a lake is actually the water table. They had to go down below the water table to excavate. So the next thing is you come back in. This is called building in the wet. And if I remember, I'm going to show you building in the dry. So they're working, they brought in all this clean soil. And they're working with a live river. And they're putting up this fabric log to protect the bank. They can seed those logs, or they can stuff willow cuttings into them, and they'll get stuff to grow to protect the bank. You can see they've lined it with rock here, and hay bales there. You can imagine what would happen if they had to have a large flood. They would have lost probably a couple $1 million worth of soil. This is Butte High students down on the new built floodplain. You can see now the willers are coming in. By 2006, it looks like that. The willows are now holding this together really well. So that was right in Butte. The state DEQ is taking on, that was 1 mile of creek. The state is taking on like it says 24 miles right there. 24 miles of creek. This was at Ramsey Flats. This was the most extensive deposit. You can see here that it actually on Ramsey Flats, we would get these blue salts in the summer. Blue salts are copper salts. And salts are salts. When it rains on that, they dissolve like that. And part of this story should be copper was the way we made money, but aquatic life is extremely sensitive to copper too. So copper is the two sides of the coin, if you will. So here's building in the dry the way the state did it. And honestly, these two rebuildings of a river, this is in the infancy of how do you rebuild a river. This was a major project, a world-class project. So,
and Joe, if I may. So one of the things that Butte is trying to read, the new story we want to tell, is there's nowhere in the world where you have a larger concentration of professionals in the restoration economy. So literally, the stuff that Joe's going down here didn't exist until we did it here. And one of the things we're really are coming to understand about the value we offer now, which is not copper to light the world, it's now the concept of the professionals who've done this to go in and clean up sites like this, to go to other places, not just the United States, but in the world. We've had visitors from Mongolia who were talking about a mine that wanted to go in and what they need to ask of that to make sure they didn't have the same things afterwards. We have this kind of status we're starting to build for a community from a economic development standpoint of a restoration economy. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but right
No,
when he's
that's
getting
good.
into like literally, yeah, what he's showing you, the process and the science, and really just hundreds of badasses who live here now.
Here is building in the dry. You can see over here they're removing tailings on the floodplain, so they got an excavator and haul trucks. And down here they're rebuilding a new channel. So they're putting in these soil lifts. Those will be the banks. They'll plant willows in them. They've brought in clean soil back in here, and they've left the old contaminated channel in place for the moment. And it's what they'll do is once they've finished this channel, they'll turn the water into it, and then they'll go back and clean out the old channel. So this was that Ramsey Flat section. All of these white areas are the tailings and the barren areas. In 2014, they've finished it, so you can see they've built. It's actually, in my opinion, a little bit over-engineered, but and I just talked to the project manager a couple of days ago, and they're starting to get beavers in there. And originally, he said, "Here's the thing: we're going to get the vegetation established. We'll take beavers out if we have to." Now this is well established. He says, beavers have at it, and beavers will actually renaturalize this whole aquatic system, and they will do what engineers can't really figure out how to do.
Where do the tailings go that have to be removed?
They have gone over to the opportunity ponds, which are not ponds, they're dry tailings ponds. So Anaconda has 5 square miles of tailings, and that same project manager, Joel Chavez, likes to say, we're going to take all the rats and put them in one trap. So that's where they go.
And that, Joe, that includes the Milltown Dam?
Yeah, actually, yeah, all the Milltown Reservoir sediments came back up to Opportunity as well. It's a good place for them. It is another place that will be managed forever. So it gets a grass cap on it, and it's called a waste management area, and they'll have monitoring wells there. And
Is that lined?
no, it is not. So good question, huh? No, they would have had to dig everything up, put a liner down, and then put everything back over 5 square miles. No, it's not lined. Hopefully the water balance works out. We could get into that sometime if you want. So that was Ramsey Flat. I mean, yeah, this is Ramsey Flat. Silver Bow Creek and Browns Gulch coming in. We're going to be standing right here in this next photo. So that's what it looks like now. It's all grasses and. So let's talk about that. That's the story about Silver Bow Creek and the streamside tailings and the cleanup. Let's turn to groundwater and abandoned mine drainage or acid mine drainage. This is one of the pump stations at the high ore mine. So underground mining required dewatering as well as the Berkeley Pit. So they drew the water table way down. This water, well, I'll get to it in a minute, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I do, right there. So 1870s to 1982, they were dewatering the mines. Approximately 8 cubic feet per second were going straight to Silver Bow Creek. It was very acidic. It had so much copper in it, they could extract copper out of it. This is actually the water that is now going to fill the Berkeley Pit. So this is a cross section through the 10,000 miles of underground workings. So here's the bottom of the Berkeley Pit. These red lines going down are some of the shafts. There's actually a lot more shafts, but these deepest workings are about a mile deep. So you get the idea of this huge deep network. So they had drawn the water table all the way down to there. So 1955, they had really taken out all of the big ore veins, and they needed to find a way to mine lower grade ore. So the veins were like, I don't know, like up to like 50% copper they could be, some of the minerals. This is probably, at best, this would have been maybe 1% copper. 2%?
That's what I've heard on some places.
Right now, they are mining 0.2% copper. So early Berkeley Pit, growing a bit, grow some more. And that's kind of what it looked like when they finished. So where we're standing, this is probably your viewing stand that you own or like to pretend you own. Right, John?
Someday I will, that's right.
Someday you will. When you're king of the world, John.
No.
So it's about, and this is the deepest part right here, it's about 1,800 feet from where we're standing down to the bottom. Mine now is pumping tailings over 700 feet up to here. Pretty expensive endeavor. And
So
it's-
they pump it in a slurry?
they pump it in a slurry, yes. So it's not just pumping water, it's pumping this really dense stuff uphill. So Earth Day, ironically enough, 1982, AERO, in a unilateral decision, a nice corporate decision, said, you know, we bought this mine and we're not really miners, we're actually an oil company. Let's just turn off the damn pump. We're paying $2 million a year to pump water. So they did. And so they ended up with, the lake. So there's the town of Butte on the edge of the pit.
When they were pumping the water out, where was it going?
Into the creek.
Into the creek. Straight to the creek. Actually, it was the worst insult to the aquatic life in the creek.
Yeah.
Was that direct mine water going in. I don't remember if I have that. There was a guy named Spindler. He was the first environmental manager for AERO. No, it would have been for the Anaconda Company. And he wrote a paper. They were trying to decrease the amount of metals and stuff that were going to the creek, changing their operation around that. So here's the way the rise looks in the underground. So you start out here on Earth Day, and it just jumps up several thousand feet within like a year. And then it starts to curve off. It curves off for two reasons. One is anytime you pump a well down and then turn off the pump, the water will rise in the well real quickly, and then it slows down and slows down. But in addition to that, when it reached the Berkeley Pit, it suddenly had a vast expanse of area it could fill. So that really slowed it down. I think that's why you get the sharp inflection in that curve. So yeah, 60 years the current rise. So the solution to this whole thing is that right now, gosh, I've just given so many different presentations, I can't remember what's in this one. Right now, the remedy is all of the water in the 10,000 miles of underground workings is now reporting to the Berkeley Pit. So yeah, all of this underground system is flooding and water's rising, but it all slopes downhill to the pit. We have a lot of mine shafts and wells out there that are monitored every month, so we know exactly where the water table is and we know what's going on. And in the year 2023 is when they have to start this treatment system. They've already built the first version of a lime addition treatment plant. This will not quite cut it, we now understand. One of the main problems is this will meet the metals standard, so arsenic, cadmium, copper, lead, and zinc, and probably a few others. This will take it out. But it's what you're doing is exchanging calcium for those metals. So the metals go as a precipitate and calcium goes into solution, and this does nothing for the high levels of sulfate in there. So for one thing, people have talked about precipitating gypsum, which is calcium sulfate. More of a problem is that they won't be able to pass something called the whole effluent toxicity test. And that they take two different organisms, one's a fathead minnow and one's Ceratophrys, a water flea. And they have to run these tests with these organisms in the water. They change the water, I think, daily. The Sarah Daphne have to raise 3 broods, so they have to reproduce. Now, of course, they have to survive and raise 3 broods. The problem with it is this water is probably too salty. There's just too much stuff dissolved in it for a sensitive thing like a Sarah Daphne to live. So,
And to add a little bit onto that, that in perpetuity solution that we've talked about as our solution, the solution we've been given, that plant is going to pump just at the exact level of the infill. So it's never going to pump it down. You'll never see a dry hole. So just at the level it's continually infilling, we will be pumping away. When we talk in perpetuity, we're talking longer than the pyramids have been on the earth. This is the kind of solution we've been saddled with. You really need to put that in your head. We're talking about motors and pumps. They're supposed to run longer and being replaced, obviously, but the solution itself is supposed to run longer than anything that man has ever built has existed. So I need you to put that in your head again, that this is a solution we've been offered. And it's a solution that we don't have an opportunity to contribute to a discussion in those closed and private negotiations on the consent decree. So again, just some other details, and I guess I love to interject. Thank you, Joe.
well, you know, I mean, this is a big thing for Butte, obviously, yeah.
Obviously, I know we've talked about how the discussions were kind of closed, but I mean, do you know if as part of those discussions there was kind of a, hopeful Internet of Things type approach to this is the technology that we have now, and
Yeah, there's a
hopefully
5-year
in
review.
perpetuity.
There's a 5-year review process in which every 5 years they're supposed to look at the remedy and say, is it working and is there new technology?
Okay.
And I think with some of the frustrations as a community member and also as a member of just what we've had to do in the past, in the last 2 5-year reviews, new technologies and tests of them have been brought forward to the EPA to say, look, there might be reason to take a look at this. And EPA thus far has summarily dismissed them without discussion. So that's part of the problem, is that there's this community involvement that is backed by science, millions of dollars have been spent on studies to prove these new technologies, or these new models of the solution, and they really just haven't met with a response.
Follow up?
Yeah.
Is some of that related to funding? Do you know specifically? I mean, I know there's a lot going on with the national budget and the state budgets.
It's not national budget this time, but you got to remember, Superfund has been defunded.
Right.
It's been defunded for a long time. The responsible party, Joe made an allusion
British
to it earlier.
Petroleum now.
Yeah,
Right.
basically, it's BP. They're responsible underneath the lawsuit of paying for the remedy, but again, they did a really, really good job. Joe said something earlier. There are solutions. I mean, and to be honest, various ranges of the solutions are just 3 of those new fighter jets we're building right now. If you didn't build those and you took that money and put it here, we'd be clean. Okay, so it's not technical practicability as so far as the money that AERO and now BP were beholden to is not enough to do a full clean. It's enough to put in a solution that protects human health, which is the letter of the law, not to restore to original conditions, which is not the letter of the law of Superfund.
Thank you.
The other thing is I would mention is, so the process goes along, you do the studies, the EPA writes a record of decision. They say, they've already named who's going to pay for it, and they sort of name what the remedy is going to be. But then they go into negotiations for a consent decree. And who signed this consent decree was simply AERO, Montana Resources, the current operator, EPA, and the state of Montana. That's signed. So there's now a legally binding contract between all those entities that says this is the remedy. End of story. There is a part still in the timeline that says before they get to this point where they have a built and operating plant, they have to look at any new technology that's out there. So there is a step in there where they will have to look at that. Yeah.
So these closed door conversations, are they with the stakeholders that you just said, or who's there besides
In the new one, Montana Resources doesn't participate. They were named a responsible party. They don't participate. But the other party that is in those is Butte Silver Bow County government. So our county attorney and our planning director and
but very specifically are not allowed to communicate what
They can't
are
tell
talking
us
about inside.
Oh,
what's going
okay,
on.
I was
Even
gonna-
though we are represented as a public, we're represented, we're not allowed to know in any way what's happening there while we're being represented.
And it's-
Until the outcome comes out.
It's difficult because it is so big and complex, what they're dealing with now, which is groundwater and soils and stuff that is right outside of this mine flooding situation. So they're working on that now. It is so complex that you kind of go, well, does Butte Silver Bow have the money to actually have technical expertise that can keep up with the discussions? The answer is absolutely not. I mean, it was hard for me when I was with DEQ to keep up on this. And I got some help from Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology on groundwater, and there's another guy, he's a PhD surface water modeler that I started working with for surface water and our arguments about surface water. But you can imagine the money that Atlantic Richfield puts into their consultants. So it's a
And lobbyists.
yeah, and yeah. So this is the picture today. Just this is a good view. This is, in a way, maybe a better view than we would have had it in the snowstorm. But
Yeah. You never know. We might still get a sneak out there.
so here's all the waste rock that they've piled up. So anytime you're mining, you have a strip ratio, which means you have to move waste rock to get your ore. And their current strip ratio is about 2 to 1. Two scoops of waste rock to 1 scoop of ore.
And the ore is only 0.5%.
No, it's 0.2%.
0.2, sorry, 0.2.
I think it's like 0.23%, roughly.
But still, 2/3 of the copper is still in the ground?
Yes.
Even at that.
Yeah, but it's more disseminated, or it's a lot deeper. There's deeper stuff down there too. So here's Lake Berkeley, and here's the concentrator. Here's where they get the ore, they crush it, they mill it, they extract the concentrate, and then they pump the tailings as a slurry up to right in here. The tailings run across this surface, so this is now downhill. The natural valley, that was downhill, but it runs across this surface. So up at this near end, the coarser stuff's falling out. It's kind of fine sand size. You get out here, and it's silts and clays. They used to call them slimes. And then at the back side is a lake formed by the water that's decanting off of the tailings. And then here's the original Silver Bow Creek. Here was Dixie Creek, and here's Yankee Doodle Creek. So there's clean water coming into it. This is now a closed circuit mine. They discharge no water, and they haven't since MR started operating it. There's a pump station right there. They pump this water down to operate their concentrator. Even with that amount of water, they still have to bring in additional water. Let's see, what else? Well, if we were sitting at Butte High School, because that's why I'd set this up, there's where we would be sitting. There's East Middle School. So this is the new pit. If you were familiar enough with it, you would realize now they've gotten all the way up here and they're taking that part down. See, anything else I need to show there? Well, no, I'm
And so
gonna.
where's the original stream bed is kind of,
It comes through this side of it.
and
So it
then,
came down like this and through here, and you know the town of Meaderville sat right in there. And then there's where the old channel starts up, is that little slot right there. But that's a wholly constructed channel now.
Joe, what year was that photo?
Boy, you know, it was taken by a space shuttle astronaut, and I want to say early 2000s or maybe even late 90s. Seems like I've had that for a long time. I don't remember when somebody went, "Oh, look at this picture." I was like, "Ooh, that's a good one." That was before Google Earth was around, I think, or easy to work with. One thing you need to realize is that, like I said, the Berkeley Pit forms a capture system. but there's a groundwater divide here. So here's the Berkeley, and all of the water in these workings are sloping downhill, so flowing downhill to the Berkeley. But there's another aquifer system. It's the alluvial aquifer system, so it's gravels, not bedrock, and it's flowing that way. And there are these two aquifer systems that both are going to, this is contaminated by, I don't know if anybody here has ever heard the term the parrot tailings, but here it's kind of a topic. And they were tailings left in the ground on this side of the divide. The copper levels in the groundwater are higher than they are in the Berkeley Pit. The pH of the water is about 2.5. You can pump the water out of the ground and plate copper onto iron with it. It's blue. It's about that color. So here was where I explained before how we cleaned up the Colorado tailings. The other thing they had to do was do something about groundwater. They knew groundwater was getting to the creek too. So before and after, they've taken out the Colorado tailings. They've now built a lime addition treatment plant here. They've built a new floodplain. And what they realized was if they measured the load of copper here, say it's 10 pounds per day, then they could go down here and measure the load of copper, and it was 25 pounds per day. And so you go, some are gaining a lot, and it was gaining, almost all of it was gaining through groundwater. That's how they knew this. So they took, once they originally you had, here's the water, in cross section, here's the water table sloping down to the stream, right? And so the stream's gaining all of this contaminated groundwater. When they rebuilt that floodplain, they said, aha, so they raised it up here so that they're now no longer going to gain that groundwater. As a matter of fact, they may be losing a little bit of clean water to the groundwater. They left the old channel largely in place, and it goes right along here, and it's doing such a damn good job of capturing contaminated groundwater. It still does. It goes to this pond here, and they pump it up here, lime it, and the reason those look light green is there's particles settling out, and it's refracting the light, making it look green. So another fairly in perpetuity, maybe not as long of in perpetuity, because this is just the parrot tailings instead of the ore body that has to wear itself out. So this is where the parrot tailings are.
In our town, just to give you a frame of reference, the Civic Center?
Does anybody know where the Civic Center is?
It's right at the back parking lot of the Civic Center is what we're talking about.
This is, if anybody's driven down Harrison Avenue, that's Harrison Avenue, and you pass by the Civic Center right there. This was the old Silverbow Creek course right along there. So they had to put in this brown line is an area, again, they decided, EPA decided it was technically impracticable to remove those tailings and clean that area up. State disagrees, but they put in another groundwater capture system there. And so that water is now pumped down to that treatment system. This is my guest appearance in this show, I guess. I don't know why I put this. This is a slag wall canyon. It's kind of cool. It's kind of cool for Montanans because you can go put your waders on and walk down there. And ARCO nor Silverbow Creek nor Butte Silverbow can tell you to get the hell out of the creek because of our stream access law. So I like to wade it. It's kind of fun. So here's the parrot tailings. Here's what is in big argument is this is the plume, or the states argue that's the size of the plume. It goes all the way down to, here's the confluence. So this is where it's probably hitting the creek. This is Blacktail Creek coming in here. And then this is where that subdrain is. The two arguments that the state has, I can't remember what's in this thing. The two arguments the state has is we don't think your subdrain is necessarily 10 minutes? Woo!
Great job.
And, huh?
You're doing great.
Okay. I'm gonna rush through some parts, but big arguments. We don't think your capture system is capturing it all, and we think that in the future, the parrot tailings will drive this plume to move further.
And really quick, it's not just an argument, it's bounded by fact. Some of those millions of dollars of studies that have been done have been gone down and drill wells, pull water up, and you can characterize the water all the way down at that other creek from the water that originates at the parrot. It's very easy to characterize that that's the same water. We've presented those findings, those details, and you're asking, well, hey, isn't there a process by which we can get them to see things? Well, this is one of those really great examples. That data was presented and EPA said no. So that's still that argument that occurs, is that it is quantified. But there is now a process by which that juggernaut that is Superfund has to get through its process to come to understand that data means something and what we're up to.
I'd also add to that, the way it's gone is that most of the documents now have been written by ARCO's consultants, and the volume just on that one issue, it's probably about that thick. And it took a long time for me to sort of keep up on it as kind of the lone DEQ person. There was natural resource damage people that had some expertise in it, but ARCO's kind of got the main bulk of the discussion sitting there now. So the worst problem still is stormwater, and this is at the upper end of that channel. The Civic Center is right behind us. But you can see when it rains, the only time there's water in this part of the channel is when it rains. There's no longer through flow. There's a groundwater capture system, so there's no groundwater getting into it. What would be the problem with stormwater? Well, this is what most of the upper part of the hill looked like, was these barren dumps. So one of the things they had to do was come in and they would cut down those steep slopes, and they would then lay down a layer of lime if it was below 5.5 pH, and then they would put soil down and cover it with grass. So no longer the severe erosion like that. And when is a street a stream? Well, here's a good picture of one. And this is our sub-sewer system, our storm sewer system. You can see the blue salts that form on it. So it's not only the stuff that's washing off the streets or that used to wash off of those waste dumps. There's problems underground, and what it is. The piping and the storm sewer systems were built in the day when the best backfill material was probably tailings or waste rock. Readily available, let's bring it in and build the system and backfill it with that. That's kind of the look of the storm sewer. I'm going to have to rush through this part. So, actually, where are we at today? We do have fish in the creek, and I don't know how to rush through this too much, but this is Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. This is probably 15 years ago. And he's got a little it's an electric backpack shocker. So this wand sends out electric current, it stuns the fish, they scoop them up with a net, put them in a bucket, and they can count them and weigh them, and it's a fish survey. So first thing that showed up were sculpins. Native fish, fairly tolerant of metals and nutrients, low oxygen. Next thing, it showed up about the same time. Suckers, and suckers are also native fish, so good sign, at least we get fish back. And they're also very tolerant of low oxygen and metals. The first trout that showed up, not a salmonid, but this is a brookie, and this took a while. It was a few years later. This wasn't the first one, but I just like this picture. That's a spawning male brook trout. I never knew they looked like that. Really brilliant colors too. And this is just downstream of Butte. This is another fish biologist, And our sewage treatment plant is right around the corner. And so Joe Naughton said, you know what, there's cutthroat trout right down here, kind of hiding in there. And I think they were kind of hiding in the part over here that water's not very well mixed. This is probably Silverbow Creek water, and that's still mostly sewage treatment plant water, but he had to come down and prove it. Those are the fish that are coming out of Durant Canyon. Durant Canyon's an interesting tributary in that it has been cut off for 100 years from the rest of the upper Clark Fork by this severe contamination in Silverbow Creek. And this is where they think the cutthroat come from. The brook trout have been living in Blacktail Creek all the way up above the mining for a long time. Matt Vincent, our last chief executive, as a boy used to go up there fishing on Blacktail Creek and catch brook trout, but this is down right by German Gulch, and that's a damn big cutthroat. So I'm not going to be able to get into this part of it, but this guy right here, he's the contaminant biologist for this region, including the Clark Fork. If you talk to him, he will tell you, yeah, we've got fish there, but it doesn't look the way it should look yet. And so they're still not meeting the standards they need to meet, and hopefully we will push them to get this done right. But as John and I have been saying, we're kind of locked out of the discussion of the consent decree.
Do they do any like toxicology reports on the animals?
They've done a few. They, you know, interestingly enough, they opened Silverbow Creek up to catch and release fishing. Catch and release because there's not enough numbers. They really don't want you removing the fish. They did some studies. They did a mercury body burden. This is one of the few streams that doesn't have a mercury problem. They don't have a mercury warning. So, yeah, this is my, lot of graphs, right? This is the science, this is the stuff that I've been working on. Let me show you this one, because this one's, this is, gotta go back one. So, here's that groundwater treatment plant I talked about. Here's the sewage treatment plant, and their effluent line comes right around here. So we have a stream monitoring station right here, stream monitoring station right here. EPA in 2008, a document called this sewage treatment, this treated sewage effluent, the largest tributary source of copper. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks came in and said, we're going to do there is on Silverbow Creek. They said, we're going to put caged fish in the creek. So they put one cage up here, one cage down here. And the cages are about like that. And so they're flow-through cells just sitting in the creek, and they put fingerlings in there. They have to come and feed them. But this is, they had some real, and it was that, the guy holding the big trout, Trevor Selch, that conducted this. The blue, I think this goes as a, it'll animate itself, I think, in a second. This line is the copper in the stream upstream. The orange is the copper in the stream downstream. This red line on the side here, this is the copper compliance ratio. The standard is based on the hardness in the stream at the time you take the sample. So the standard's always bouncing around. So you just take the copper concentration and divide it by the standard, and you come up with a ratio. Pretty simple to understand. If it's above 1, it's not good. If it's below 1, you're okay. So here we are, and obviously downstream we've been getting these spikes, and they're obviously associated with the sewage treatment plant. Well, upstream, downstream, just like I said, we had a rain event, and our sewage treatment plant is not designed this way, but we get big surges of water during rain events. So, what we had was 100% mortality downstream, 0 mortality upstream. science doesn't get any better than that. Field science anyways. So this is, you know, it's really hard to document a fish kill, but I guess this is one way to do it. And this is not even, well, yeah. It was a fight I had with EPA, I mean, and their lawyer, and it was, I don't know where it's gone now, I'm retired. I gotta learn to relax. My wife tells me I get too excited about this. So, managing groundwater in perpetuity, what does it mean? I don't know, you know, you look at, there's gotta be some institution that's going to manage this forever. So, jokingly, I mean, Butte's pretty full of Irish, and you know, I can envision a monastery on the side of the pit and the monks up there. But you know, when I presented this here, we have a Serbian Orthodox church, and I had to say, of course, the Serbian the Orthodox Church has got a longer history than the Catholic Church. And a couple of ladies said, yeah. So, you know, this was to us guys, so ultimate, you know, we live here. So this is a program that's housed up at Montana Tech, where we get, mostly it's aimed at K through 12 and teaching them what's happened on the Clark Fork. So we go to schools from Butte all the way to Missoula, and we do a couple of days in the class, and then we try and get them out on the river, and we hope they remember some of this, realize what a big deal it is. Am I all right? Okay. That was it.
Like Joe was saying, a lot of groundwater comes in, it's very high in copper. So for a long time, even during, once the pit had shut down and filled and the new mine was running over here, they had a pump down there, and that pump was lifting water up, putting it across a thing called a precipitation plant. And they literally just had iron in there. And they pump copper water across the iron, and they'd exchange the plate of the copper, and pick up the iron, and put the iron back, and they'd have pure copper, and they'd take the copper and go sell it. Well, there was a small earthquake, one of these berms let go, and created a little tsunami. It went across and knocked the pipes out on the other side. And since that happened, the mine won't let their guys go down to fix those pipes anymore because they're afraid of that happening again. Turn the iron from green, or sorry, the pit from green to brown, because you had rust water. And then they stopped pumping that, and it's basically gone back to being a copper-based solution as more groundwater's coming in, and it's turned back to being green.
What does that mean in terms of its toxicity?
Joe?
Human health wise, it's not that bad, but as far as if this was released to Silverbow Creek, it'd be pretty bad. They're really, fish are really sensitive to copper. You know, it's a nutrient that we need in our bodies, and I know fish do too. It attacks their gills. Anything with gills, they're really sensitive to copper.
Because that is the protection of human health. That was one of the first proposals put out. Okay, because that's what the law says. And that's what I think one of our issues, of course, with the CD is that, and this is great, it's clearing out, you're able to see a lot more of it. And you can see that treatment plant really well. Now you can see those two green towers.
And you see the green trees over there?
This was a
The
town.
town of Meaderville's right there, do you see it? It's what they would do. John should tell the story. I'm not from Butte.
Well, I mean, I'm not either. I got here when I was 6. But
Okay.
the whole point
You got
of...
more of the history than I
Yeah. But, I mean, what happened was there was a lot of ore here, right? And they figured out... So he was talking about the underground. One of the pictures he showed us the high ore, that sluice of the water coming out of the high ore. The high ore was called that because the vein they were chasing through the high ore was 40% copper, every rock. And literally some of the old timers who would come to our bar said they could go down there and they could hit it with a pick and take it stuck in the copper. It was gooey with copper, okay? Right behind where that treatment plant was the St. Lawrence Church. And it's a great picture of one of the dump trucks literally dumping the load on top of the church. They buried that town. or if they could, or they just raised it to the ground. So the bar that's actually in our tasting room right now was from the Rocky Mountain Club, the Rocky Mountain Cafe. So the Rocky Mountain Cafe was right down in here. And in the 50s, they came in and said, okay, town, either you're going to sell to us or we're just going to burn you down. And the guy who owned the cafe said, cool, and he gave the bar to a museum, and eventually came to us. And that's why we've got it now, so we don't have to tell that story. But between that time, they basically got everybody out of here, kicked them all out, or burned their houses down, and then continued the mine out. And this was starting again in the late 70s. So if you, right over the edge here, you can see the Belmont head frame right there. Over that edge right there, there's a big ore body, and you want to take the pit and go in that direction. A lot of people wouldn't sell. And what was happening is for a period of about 2 years, every night a house burned down. And this neighborhood over here just mysteriously would burn down. And then basically that got up to the late 80s. They played out and bought that mine in Chile because they didn't have to pay union wages, they didn't have to do a whole bunch of stuff, and they just shuttered this thing. So they burnt all that down to try to take over that area to expand the pit, and then said, screw it, let's go to Chile.